Live from New York, the CC Radio Network is proud to bring you tonight's show, The Rebellious Rev and the Doc, where we talk about religion like you've never heard before. There's no evangelist here, just talk about religion with a twist. So let's get started and have some fun. Welcome our hosts for tonight, The Rebellious Rev and the Doc.
There is no heaven, there is no hell, there is only this world and its dark reflection. And we do not know in which of the two worlds we are.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our show, The Rebellious Rev and the Doc.
That's true.
I'm the Rev, and
that's so they tell me.
He's the Doc. And tonight's show was actually a religious continuation of Monday's show. ISIS, Ukraine.
No, Ukraine has nothing to do with it. We're staying away from Ukraine.
Vladimir.
No, you like Vladimir.
Vladimir, he's pushing his religious crusade.
I think you're a Russian sympathizer. I'm going to report you to the NSA.
He's got his, yes, absolutely. He's got his crusade against other religions.
No, really, it's a continuation of a world turned upside down. Does God exist? If there is a God, why are all these things happening in the world? Man's inhumanity to man. You know, the Yazidi, the ISIS slaughtering of children. It's just unconscionable. I mean, if it's believable, it's just unconscionable. But then again, you say to yourself, think back to Newtown. One crazy person kills 20 children and 6 adults. And America mourns and nothing gets done. You know, there hasn't been an easing of gun control, no registration. So why should that surprise you? You know, the esteemed Rabbi Kushner wrote a book entitled "Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?" And there really is no answer. You know, you can think of the book of Job. God actually is wagering with the devil. The devil says to God.
And the devil is witty right now, I'll tell you.
Well, right now, you know, I mean, back in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the devil says to God, I'll bet you, why shouldn't Job be happy? He's got everything. Let's take things away. And God basically takes everything away from Job. And he still doesn't waver in his belief, so God rewards him by giving him everything twofold. But the bottom line is, pick up the paper. It's depressing.
Well, the depressing part is the not so much as the Islam religion, but ISIS is calling the Catholic people that they're slaughtering devil worshippers. Well,
there are those who believe, the ones who espouse jihad, that kill the infidel. Yeah, that's what it says in the Quran. They said, kill the infidel. And anyone who's not a believer in the word of the Quran and follower of Allah and Muhammad, they're infidels. So you and I are infidels, Felix, Rev.
Rev, yes we are. We're all infidels. But, it's the world is upside down. Like you said, it's how could people think that beheading other people is in the name of God or in the name of anybody. You know.
I mean, this is what they did back during the Middle Ages. You know, the beheadings and putting heads on a post.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what, you know, this is what, you know, the Europeans feared about the Norsemen. They said, you know, they would, you know, cut off somebody's head and carry it into battle or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is no different. And now you have children involved. I mean, and I'm not talking about the children that are being killed and maimed and massacred. I'm talking about 14-year-olds who can't wait to get into the fight.
Well, you know, the numbers of ISIS is growing. There are, you know, people joining them all the time. Westerners are joining them.
Well, that's what we said on Monday. You know, we said the numbers are growing, more Westerners, more, you know, it's easy enough to pick out people who have Middle Eastern passports, but there are many sneaking through there that have European passports, American passports, granted not a lot, but still, it only takes one person to fly a jet into a building, you know?
Well, actually, they caught somebody in the United States that was an ISIS supporter that came in. I'm not sure from what country he flew in, but they, you know, he was tweeting and doing things, you know, supporting ISIS, and they arrested him. I don't know the outcome of it, but you know, it's time for. Even the Pope says it's time for us to take action. But why are we the only ones taking action? I mean, it's just...
Well, you know, America has always been, for the longest time, the world's policeman, and we can't be that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I do hear that the French and the English were supplying arms to the Kurds, also dropping arms to the Kurds, because it seems like the Kurds are the only ones that are well enough trained and brave enough to fight these guys.
Well, they're fighting for their homeland.
Yeah.
You know, they live there.
Well, so do the Iraqis that live there. The Iraqis live there also. They're running like hell. I guess the good thing is that there's a government change coming up in Iraq. What's his name? The president there?
The new one? I don't know.
He's stepping down anyway.
Maliki is the old one. But I don't know who the new one is.
You know, Maliki just stepped down. There's no new one yet. He's got to get voted in yet. And I don't think Maliki is stepping down till they have a new one. But at least he said he's resigning. It's a step in the right direction. Maybe if they get some Sunnis involved in the government also, it'll give a little more power to the government and a little more creed to the government, because before this was not government of the people. It was just a government of a few people.
Well, folks, we want to know your opinions. You can reach us at 646-595-3275. We anxiously await your phone calls. If you don't call in, the chat room is open. You can type a question, and we will do the best that we can to try to get an answer to you. Notice a couple of people are in the chat room already.
It was a 19-year-old girl in Colorado. Was that a 19-year-old girl in Colorado that was arrested?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Somebody wrote it. It was a 19-year-old girl in Colorado from our
arrested for what?
Well, I assume she wrote that we were talking about somebody in the United States was arrested for having contact. Yes, she was an ISIS supporter trying to move to meet her fiancé. Okay. All right, so somebody knows about it in Colorado.
Yeah, it seems like everything is happening in Colorado lately.
I know. Let's see. And
I heard you're going to move to Colorado.
Yeah, right. Free pot. Oh, no, not legal pot, excuse me. And he was an ISIS member. She was an ISIS supporter trying to move to meet her fiancé. And where does her fiancé live?
Well, if...
wait, I'll just...
I couldn't tell you.
But I figured
I'm sure our listener will, but I mean, even with my reading glasses, I can't see that. I have to be on top of the computer.
Well, it doesn't matter. But anyway, who is that person? Was she trying to go into Iraq or Syria, or was her boyfriend or fiancé supposed to come here? He was in Syria. Okay. And I assume she's also a Muslim?
No, don't. She doesn't have to be.
An ISIS guy marrying out of religion? I don't think that would be very good. Okay, she's telling us to look up a article, or whoever I'm sorry, not she. I'm assuming it's a woman. Whoever's writing this is asking us to open up an article and look at it. We will. New York Daily News, Com News. I'm afraid that if I try to do that now, what's going to happen is going to disconnect the show.
Yeah, we're going to lose some of our listeners.
Yeah. I appreciate the information. Okay. Let's go back to the show again, and our phone number is 646-595-3275. We'd love to get a phone call or two. We're talking today about ISIS and the rest of the crazy religious stuff that's happening along the world, and that's being blamed on religion. I mean, ISIS is doing what they're saying in the name of God, their God, but their God is the same as our God. Same God as, I assume, the same God as the Jews have and the Christians.
Ask yourself this: who is controlling the events of the world? Is man controlling his own events? Is God in control? And if God is controlled, do you think that he or she is being fair the way things are turning out with all of these examples of man's inhumanity to man? Why is God making people suffer? In the Old Testament, we understood when the flood came, God was unhappy with man and he wanted to rid the world and start all over again. The only way you can do that in this day and age is if somebody presses that button. A flood's not going to do any good. And we just had a flood in East Meadow, 13 inches. I mean, that pretty much...
East Islip.
No, it was East Meadow too, because my friend's son-in-law lost his car. But
still trying
in the Old Testament, there was always God punishing man for one thing or the other. Whether it was Adam and Eve being tossed out of paradise, the floods, the enslavement of the Israelites,
The Southern State was flooded today, also yesterday quite a bit.
What?
The Southern State was flooded.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised.
But I didn't hear anything about East Meadow. I heard East Islip.
Is there justice in the world? All of these questions come to be. And again, Rabbi Kushner's big question from his book, Why do bad things happen to good people? Some people, it seems, go through life, untouched by certain things. And then there are those who, no matter which way they turn, it seems like they're being tested in some way.
Are we being tested? Are we being punished? Or is there no God?
Yeah. Does God even exist? Is God a figment of our imagination? Is it because we need to believe in a supreme being? Well, we people. I mean, look, we have our fair share of agnostics and atheists, but in general, for those people who say they believe in God and they may not picture themselves as being religious, do we really need to believe in a supreme being, a supreme mover, the prime mover of all things?
Well, as we all get closer to death, we all look for an answer, and we all seem to gain more faith, and the answer is God.
Well, I mean, if we go back to into Greek history and Roman history, they had gods and they had questions about the gods, and especially in Greek mythology, what couldn't be explained, they said was an act of God, one of the gods. When the white man came to this country, he treated the Indians as savages, but they had their own religion. And they believed in a supreme being.
We all believe, I guess, in something. And even the atheists believe in something. They just believe that the something is nothing, basically. But atheists still live a normal life. Most atheists are like everybody else. They're honest, they're hardworking, as most of society is, religious or not. We all live by certain rules and regulations.
And if you recall, we mentioned a few weeks ago, a poll was done, and they asked people, how do you feel about having a certain person as president, and without mentioning names, and they said the one thing that they wouldn't want to see is to have an atheist as a president of the United States for some reason.
Over here, he's saying, the person in the chat room is saying, because if God were to intercede, we would have to give up free will.
Well, that's certainly very true.
Yeah, I agree.
We're born with free will, but it seems that the religion that we are born into, and it doesn't make a difference which religion it is, it makes one a slave to believe in a supreme being. That's why Muslims go to mosques on Friday, and Jews go to synagogue on Saturday, and Christians go to church on Sunday.
Okay, it says over here, perhaps mankind does not deserve free will. Perhaps that's the test. Does it deserve free will?
Well, man is always looking to blame somebody else for things that happen, for the events in the world. We make choices, and the choices that we make lead to certain outcomes. Okay?
That's true. It still bothers me so much thinking that one religion would actually be doing this to another religion. You would think, It's been done before. It's been done throughout history. People killing each other for religion.
Man's inhumanity to man. I brought it up many times already, Felix.
We don't talk
Reverend.
about the Crusades much, but that was all in the name of religion.
Well, all wars are fought, basically, in history. The Crusades, all wars are fought over religion, or political beliefs in the 20th century, political beliefs. But,
well, I don't know.
We said before, we all stem basically from the Abrahamic belief in one God. The three major religions in the world stem from Abraham. So we're half brothers at best. Even in families, while there's arguing, people could sit down at a table, and for some reason, you go back to the Middle East. As one of our callers said on Monday, this has been going on for 2,000 years plus, and I am sure, unfortunately, that 2,000 years from now it'll still be going on, if there's still an Earth, if we haven't blown each other up.
Yeah, that's the ultimate sacrifice of mankind. Killing itself in the name of religion. But, maybe we should get rid of all religions. See, it seems to be the cause of so many problems in this day and age.
It's not just in this day and age. It goes back quite a long history, but man just seems to need to believe in some higher authority. Okay? Look, even a doctor will tell you, when all else fails, pray. Well, I don't know if that's going to help.
It's not going to help, but it can't hurt. Okay, let's see what our person from the chat room is saying. Take religion and political beliefs out of the equation. Take man's free will away. Take away the intellect that is driven by free will. Would we be peaceful society, or would we be in the dark ages? Would we even exist?
Well, I think we'd be in the dark ages. Let's go back to even before the Crusades. All right? You still had people killing each other over land, over power. Okay, there were still wars, and it had nothing to do with God. So if God wasn't in the equation, it wouldn't change anything. It's just that, you enter into a war, and religious people always say, well, God's on our side. Well, the enemy also says God's on his side. And how do you know who's right? Depends who wins.
Well, maybe there's more than one God. We don't know it.
No, that much is true. There is one, if you believe in God, there is one God. That's it, period. End of story.
Yeah, but the God that somebody else believes in, it may not be the same God you believe in. It's a matter of faith.
It's what's put down in the book, okay? They only mention God. Catholicism is the one that talks about God and the Father, the Son, who was Jesus, and the Holy Ghost.
But they're still
and then it was after Jesus was crucified that all of a sudden Jesus became God. They thought he might be the Christ, that he might be the Messiah. Okay, but it was after he was crucified that he officially was named. He and God were almost synonymous. Okay? It's not that way in the Old Testament, and it's not that way in the Quran. And again, I don't want to, ignore the other religions. I honestly do not know that much about them. So,
Well, it doesn't really matter, Mark. What I'm saying is, you're a member of ISIS. You're doing what you're doing supposedly in the name of quote-unquote God. Is that the same God that you believe in?
Well, if your argument holds any water, then it's not even the same God that other Muslims believe in, because they're killing other Muslims as well.
So I'm asking you, so is it the same God?
They're basically, like I said, if you believe in God, there is only one God. That you don't question. Or you could question it. But for the sake of argument, to make things simple, let's say there is a God. How could we interpret things so differently in the Bible, where ISIS feels that they are justified in doing what they do?
Well, yeah. Well, real quickly, our caller, our person in the chat room says, that's the problem. The one book became two, then three. Eventually, the book became man's version of what the book should say.
Right, because what you have is, you have scribes who basically wrote the New Testament. You have, it wasn't even Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, even though it says the Gospel of, because the New Testament came out after they were dead. So these were things that were passed down through the ages. And as far as the Quran goes, when Muhammad went on his journey to heaven and he met with Allah, he didn't have a paper and pencil. He didn't have a stone tablet. Whatever he was told, he remembered, or so it says, and when he came back, he wrote it all down. You mean to say he remembered everything that God told him? That Moses remembered all 613 laws? I mean, he only came down with 10, Moses. But God supposedly gave Moses, at the top of Mount Sinai, 613 laws that people had to follow. Something had to be, like the Bill Murray movie, Lost in Translation.
But here we go. But when Muhammad went and he spoke to God, he got one thing. So, is it the same God talking to Muhammad?
Yeah, why not?
So why would he be telling him one thing and telling somebody else something else?
What are you talking about?
Muhammad.
Well, what about him?
He went up, the mountain to talk to God? Where did he go to meet? Where did he meet God?
No, he was sleeping, and in a dream, he went up to, I don't know exactly what he climbed or whatever, but he wound up, and God dictated the Quran to him.
Okay. Now, if God dictated the Quran, God, and it's different from the Old Testament, it's different from the New Testament.
No, actually, if you read all three, you're going to find that most of them basically say the same thing. Might be worded a little differently. All right? As far as terrorists or certain Muslims reading into things, well, people always read into things when it comes to the Bible. You bring your own interpretation. So why is it that some imams, most imams, will tell you that the Quran is a book of peace, that Islam is a peaceful religion, that we have to all get along, that
Islam is no Muslims.
What?
as long as we're Muslims.
No. What they interpret is that you should try to convert the infidel, okay, that the Quran is the final word of God because it's the last book that was written. Okay, what the Imam is saying is that the Quran is based upon the Old and the New Testament. It's just a refined version, and it's also the last version. Okay, but basically, when people read a certain passage, they interpret it in their own way. And that's the problem. That's why you have war. Okay? You can twist almost anything you want into justifying what you believe. You know, Hitler did that in Germany. Okay? He twisted things around. And the Nazi Party, which was really only about a third of the people, the backing of a third of the people, and he turned it around and he convinced the whole country, a whole nation. People were afraid to say anything wrong or against him.
I don't know.
You know, I mean, go back to the Crusades. You had the Knights Templar. Okay? The Knights Templar primarily was supposed to protect Christianity and fight against Islam. All right? But when the Knights Templar came back, because of the corruption within the Catholic Church itself, starting all the way with the Pope, okay, they made it seem like the Knights Templar were robbers, or they hid certain treasures from the East that they didn't turn over to the church, and they were being put to death. Why? Because all of a sudden, this very Pope who said, go fight
the infidels.
Their version of the infidels. So they come back, and all of a sudden, they're the ones that are the enemy. All right? They're reading out of the same book, aren't they? They're reading out of the New Testament. On one hand, the Pope said, do this, and then when they came back, the Pope said, okay, where are the treasures? What did you do? You hid them for yourselves. It all boils down to man's interpretation of what he's reading.
So maybe the Bible is too complicated.
No, man makes it complicated. Because as long as our viewer said, as long as man has free will, I can interpret what I read in one way, you can interpret what you read in another way. Who's to say who's right? The person who has the bigger army. That's what it boils down to. But I can't do any more talking without a cup of coffee, so I'm taking a 5-minute break. And don't play any music.
Of course it will play music.
No, please.
Please, why?
Because we're getting complaints about the music.
We are? The only one's complaining is you. But you don't have to listen to it.
No, my daughter complained also.
Oh, should she?
Yeah.
Tell her to go get a cup of coffee while the music is on.
What?
Tell her to go get a cup of coffee while the music is on.
She listens to the podcast.
There's always a critic in the crowd, isn't there, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know. Anyway, it's a shame, though. It really is. And as I said, Mark says, the Bible can be interpreted in many ways, which it can be. A lot of the Bible, as far as I'm concerned, you read it, and I don't know if I understand it all. I know I don't understand it all, and I don't want to, try to understand it any more than what I know. We all came from the same place. That we all agree on. Either we're from evolution or 6,000 years ago. Everybody has come from the same place. And we all go to the same place. Underground. The question is there life after? And that's where faith comes in. And I don't think you need to be extremely religious to have faith. I think anytime you take religion too far, it causes problems. Anyway, our phone number is 646-595-3275. You're listening to the Rebellious Rev and the Doc, broadcasting live from Oceanside, New York. And we're looking for phone calls as always, 646-595-3275. And if you don't want to call, jump into the chat room and write something, as one of our listeners is doing right now. Or ignore us completely. Forget about everything that's happening in the world. All the people dying. Just close your eyes and go to sleep. And that's what a lot of people are doing. I know people who don't want to hear what's happening in Iraq and Iran. They want to believe everything is rosy and peachy and everything else, and they have no interest in what's going on in the rest of the world. You know, that's not good either. I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and put on a song for a few minutes while I get my own cup of coffee and take a 2-minute break. What we're going to do is a song that from one we usually don't play, from the Jewish religion today. All right. So this is,
I guarantee you they're singing it in synagogue tonight. If this is the song you played before.
Not online. The show wasn't on.
I know that.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום shalom aleinu, aleinu ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. The Rev is getting himself a cup of coffee. And one of the other things I wanted to discuss today, really, continuation from Monday, discussing the suicide and passing of Robin Williams. Now, obviously, more news has come out that his wife said he was in the early stages of Parkinson's disease. Whether that had anything to do with his suicide, considering his depression, his bouts with depression, it's very possible it might have. But it goes along with our discussion of God today, because as our caller had said, if man has free will, then the decision to take one's own life is a decision that you make on your own. You're not being influenced by God or anything else. So you say to yourself, I remember when I was taking philosophy in college, and I wrote a paper about, is suicide ever morally justifiable? And I went into a whole thing, and for the life of me, I can't remember it now because I haven't been in college for 45 to 50 years. But you say to yourself, you know, when you discuss the religious philosophers and...
Wait a second, we have a caller.
Hold on, caller. We just noticed that we do have a call. I was in the middle of a thought, but I could wait. Caller. Hello. And who are you? Hello?
I don't know if they're not on yet.
And finish your thought.
Caller. It sounds like Maggie. It's not Maggie. It's Ann.
Yeah.
Hi, Ann.
Bye.
Sorry it took so long to answer.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
To tell you, at my age, I probably forgot what it was. Yeah, it happens a lot. Believe me, it really does. What was I saying? You know what? If you say something, I might remember.
I don't think that has anything to do with age.
Do you remember what I was saying or trying to say?
Not a clue.
Well, okay. Then,
Well, I walked away, but I'm sure you're talking about Robin Williams.
Well, I was. Suicide. I was talking about back when I was in college, and I wrote a paper for philosophy questioning whether suicide is ever morally justifiable. And of course, you have your religious philosophers who would say no, and you would have your other philosophers, I believe, like Immanuel Kant, who would say that, well, if it's for the greater good, the man who throws himself on a grenade to save his buddies, you know, you really don't have time to think when you do something like that. But I do remember that I started the paper by quoting from Time magazine. A woman was contemplating suicide, and she wrote a whole long list, a letter to her husband, telling him to make sure that the kids bathe, make sure they take their medicine, they take their vitamins, they make sure they do this, they do that. it was like she was saying, I don't think you're going to be able to make it without me, but this is my decision and this is what I want to do. With Robin Williams, I think part of it, aside from depression, I think part of it was the fact that he had this early diagnosis of Parkinson's, and when you think of Parkinson's, think of somebody like Muhammad Ali. Okay, what a vibrant person he was, and what a shell of a man he is now. And can you really claim that it's in existence? And I also remember my own dad. When my dad was on dialysis, and his kidneys were really getting worse, and other things were starting to fail. And he said if it wasn't for the fact that if he would stop dialysis, people would think that he was giving up and he was committing suicide, because basically that's what would have happened. The poisons in his body would have built up, and eventually he would have died of sepsis. Oddly enough, before he did pass away, the nephrologist took him off dialysis. Not that he took him off dialysis. He had a catheter, and he took the catheter out because he wasn't putting out enough urine anyway. He said by going to dialysis, it would be good enough to clean his system out, But, even to the end, my dad said, well, people would say it's like I'm giving up, and I don't want people to think that because I'm not giving up, So it is a choice. It is free will, and that's what we were talking about before. And now I think I've said whatever I want to say, so Ann, the floor is yours.
Hey, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. You sound great.
Thanks. It's interesting because you were talking before about the terrorism and how people kill each other, and there's a really interesting article written by Clark McCauley on the psychology of terrorism, and basically he says that to Felix's point earlier, that there's really no special association between religion and violence, and the terrorist groups have been around since World War II. They were radical and socialists. He talks about the Red Brigade in Italy and the Bieder Mannhof gang and the Red Army factions in Germany and the Shining Paths in Peru, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, he makes a really interesting statement that he says that every normal person has to believe in something more important than life, and the reason why we have to is because we all know that we're going to die, and so we need something that's going to make sense of our life and of our death. And I think he really puts it into perspective as to how and why this happens and how and why it will continue to happen.
Well, listen, as long as there's life and death, there's going to be religion and there's going to be fighting.
Well, then, you would question why, not everyone is a terrorist. So, you don't need that in your life to make your life meaningful. It's funny that we were talking about Robin Williams, because in the Dead Poets Society, he said he encourages his students to speak out and formulate their own opinions. He quotes Thoreau when he says, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. He said, what in essence is going to be your legacy? What would you like people to remember you by? Okay? And really, what most people who have family, who have children, your children become your legacy. How they live their lives, what they learn from you, that's your legacy. when none of us are going to be rich enough to endow states or universities with buildings, okay, or libraries that are going to have our name on it, so it's the small things that become our legacy.
Yeah, and that is, if you think about it, that's society in a normal function, right? So most people belong to a group, whether it be a family or your neighborhood or your religion, whatever it is that you belong to, and that's what influences your belief and your behavior and who you become. What your values are, all that kind of stuff. And Macaulay basically states that the members of underground terrorist groups put the group first in their lives, and they drop and reduce every other connection that they possibly have, and they will live and die for that group, and that's kind of how they think. So it's kind of like, I guess it's no different than we belong to a family unit, and when you belong to a family, especially in most families and in most ethnicities, people will live and die for their family. And
right, and
these
right,
terrorists,
that's right, exactly, and they look upon this group as their family. Okay,
right.
So the sacrifices that they make, they are making for the group. They'll be remembered within the group.
Yep.
Well, but say to yourself, okay, suppose you have a family and then you have a cause. How do you juxtapose the two? Family on one hand and family on the other hand being the cause that you try to live by.
Yeah, and then you look at the instance with this girl, this 19-year-old girl in Colorado, and according to the article, her parents begged her and pleaded with her, not to get involved. But you can't help but wonder if she wasn't maybe a cast out in high school, or she was rejected by her peers, or maybe she felt rejected by her family and didn't realize how much they actually cared for her. Who knows? But there's something that drives them to becoming part of that group, and I don't think that that's much different than the kid who is driven to become part of a gang.
Right, they look for acceptance wherever they can get it.
Now, was she? What religion was she? Do you know?
No, I don't know what religion she was, but her last name didn't seem to be that of a Middle Eastern descent, so I don't know.
Well, her mother might have been of Middle Eastern descent, so we wouldn't know, and she would have her father's name, but usually
how did a girl from Colorado meet a guy in Syria? Who knows?
Online.
Probably.
Social network.
Yep.
But
where she found her acceptance.
Right. If we crave acceptance. Okay. No one really wants to be different from other people. You don't want to stand out in the crowd. You want your voice to be heard, but you want your voice to be heard within the crowd. Okay, unless you're a born leader, in which case, you want to stand out in the crowd. All right, but for all intents and purposes, let's say that she was just somebody who was having problems at home, having problems relating to normal high school situations or school situations, was looking for something, trolled the internet, and maybe this appealed to her. Who knows? And that's how she met this guy. Especially now, it's very common. You could connect with people all over the world by pressing a button.
Yep, and that's why, they're using. I think they're using religion as their excuse, but it's not really the reason.
Well, what is their reason? What are they doing?
Well, what do you think the reason is? Because we really don't know.
Of course not. They're. I don't know, but they're. Is the religion? Yeah, is the religion just an excuse, or is it the reason? I disagree with you. I think they believe they are religious.
They believe what?
I think they believe they are religious. I don't think it's just an excuse religion. There are fanatics in every religion.
Well, that's true.
I
mean, there's always.
But
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I had nothing to say.
But the fanatics in every religion become fanatics. Why? I don't think they just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, you know what? I think I'm going to be a fanatical, whatever today." I think it comes over time. I think it all stems from feeling that they're not accepted in whatever societal group that they belong to.
Well, I think this leader of ISIS certainly came to his position over time. They say he was a disgruntled rebel fighting against in Syria, and just like Osama bin Laden, okay.
Yep.
Back in 1980, when the United States was arming the Mujahideen against the Russians, and Osama bin Laden was part of the Mujahideen, things were fine. But then when that ended, the United States very quickly said, okay, we wash our hands of everything, goodbye. And literally, bin Laden was left holding the bag, and he looked around, and nobody was willing to do anything, so he started to preach or espouse what he felt, and he gained the following. Okay, and I think that's what's happening with this leader from ISIS. That he now has a following, people who look to him just the way other people look to bin Laden. And, right now, let's hope, and they've already threatened to come here and disrupt.
Well, they want their flag flying over the White House. And this
that was they made a huge threat.
Yeah. Now the leader of ISIS was in our hands. He was in Guantanamo. He was captured, and we released him.
Yep.
Let him go.
Yep.
Well, but we knew, the ones we released, when I say we, I'm talking about, obviously, the government. The government released because they couldn't make a case against them. So they were holding these people for over 10 years against their will, obviously, and they were not being given, a speedy trial. So we had no alternative but to release them. Just like, we talk about trading the 5 prisoners in Guantanamo for Sergeant Burkle. Okay? The United States couldn't make a case against them, and eventually they were going to have to release them anyway. So why not try to get the freedom of this one American soldier? Forget about what might or might not be true, because he hasn't yet had his day in court. But there was one prisoner of war, so let's get him out. And the Israelis do it all the time. The Israelis trade 20, 25, 50 people just to get a couple of soldiers released. So...
Yeah. And now you have a person, who sat in Guantanamo for 10 years and basically became extremely aggressive, wanted to, get even with the people who basically took your freedom away and hurt you, right? And so you continue to use aggression as a means to your goal and or your personal, advantage or achievement. And you gain this following and you become popular. And so at the end of the day, is that really about a religion, or is that actually about your own personal, vengeance?
We have another caller coming into our conversation. Well, I don't know. What do they call you, Death Shepherd? Can you hear us?
Yeah, that's my handle on Blog Talk, Death Shepherd.
Okay, you're on the air.
If Wikipedia has any truth to it, it tells us that in 2010, the total number of suicides in the U.S. was about 39,000, which is about 106 people dying per day by choice. And I think that lends beautiful contrast. And when I say beautiful, I don't mean that suicide is beautiful. I mean, we look at politics and we look at media and we hear about maybe 10 or 15 people being murdered by some political group, and we get really excited about it and we talk about it for weeks. But yet we have these 106 people a day killing themselves voluntarily in the United States, and we talk about that, but we don't get as excited about that as we do as the stuff that's sensationalized in the media. And my point is simply this. In the description of her show, it says, can we possibly make heads or tails of a world turned upside down? And I agree with that, because that's what I think we spend most of our lives doing. And my answer to the question is, the upside is down and the downside is up. It's called the world of opposites. It's called contrast. It's what drives our evolution. It's why the words God and the devil exist. Because the word devil also means evil, and it also means live alive. All of these things that are happening aren't meant to be deciphered or figured out. They exist because that's what the world is. It's atrocity, it's love, it's hate, it's beauty, it's non-beauty, it's all these things at once. But as a species, we have not yet come to the point of spiritual maturity to accept that in its depth and in its entirety. We constantly want to fight against it and ask politicians to solve the problem for us. Do you have any comments?
Interesting.
Well,
Mark, you thinking?
I'm thinking, yeah, because he happens to be right.
Yeah.
I mean, we never will solve the problem. We never will understand. The bottom, we would expect politicians, people that we send to Congress to help govern, to come up with solutions, but they're only people and they can't come up with solutions. You would have to ask yourself, what would drive a person to the depths of despair and depression to feel that there is no way out of their situation except to make the choice of suicide? And as one of our bloggers who logged in earlier said, man has free will. Okay, this is one of the things that we were given. If you want to go back to the Garden of Eden, God put man in paradise, but he said, from the tree of knowledge you shall not eat. Okay, otherwise you can do anything you want. And if you've ever raised children, when you tell children not to do something, that's the first thing they're going to do. So we really don't need Satan to tell Eve to eat the apple. Okay, man has free will, and unfortunately, because of chemical imbalances, let's say, within ourselves, some people are more prone than others to seek out suicide as a solution to their problems, because they see one problem building on another and on another, and either they seek professional help too late, or they don't seek professional help, or they see, as I said before, no solution or no end. And the only solution that they see is suicide. And that tends to leave really more questions for those who are left behind in my interpretation. Okay? And I've said this before, that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If people, and I know people who are depressed, people who are bipolar, and the medication's not working, they don't have time to stop and think this out reasonably. They're going to act on impulse. And once you act, sometimes, you can't stop. You can't turn back.
I think that, and I'm speaking from personal experience with past thoughts of suicide, when I was in my 20s, and being in that really, really, really dark place, or as some people would call a very, very low vibration, and coming full circle out of that. I don't necessarily say to people, yes, kill yourself. That's not what I say. But what I do say is if you do, and you do it in the privacy of your own home, and you don't put other people's lives into jeopardy, I actually applaud you because you've exercised the ultimate choice, the ultimate exercise of free will that animals do not have. Not that I'm comparing us to animals, but if you look at every choice that we've ever had...
Man is an animal. We're the only ones that have free will. You're right about that.
It is. And it's always a choice. Everything's a choice, whether to live or to die. Minus the morality argument of, do you go to hell, whatever that is. If you do kill yourself, I always say I respect the fact that you made the choice. But if you're going to do it privately. Don't endanger other people. But it really brings me back to all of the hoopla of, if 106 people on average are killing themselves every day, why are our pains in such a bunch because a famous person did it? His name happens to be Robin Williams. And I'm not demeaning this man by any means, but we worship these people and we live vicariously through them. Vicar being the vicar of Christ, being the Pope, being the intercessor, being you can't get to God unless you go through someone else. I think we need to take a hard look at why we worship these people. Thank you for opening the mic.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I wrote a tribute on Facebook to Robin Williams, and in that tribute, I mentioned, I don't know if you remember this from your childhood, but there's a poem called Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson. And I quoted it, the beginning of it, on Monday evening. When Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked up at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-shaven and imperially slim. And then it goes on to say that Richard Cory was the prime employer of this whole town. He had a manufacturing company. People worked for him. They loved him. They wanted to be like him. He provided everybody with a job. And then one fine day, Richard Cory went home and put a bullet through his head. And everybody wonders why. And basically, we can go into a lot of things. Money can't buy happiness. You don't know what's going on in somebody else's head, in somebody else's home. We watch sporting figures, and kids like to say, this is when I said, I quoted the commercial when Michael Jordan was playing and still very popular, I want to be like Mike. Okay, everybody wanted to be Michael Jordan. And at some point in our lives, everybody wants to be like Robin Williams, to be able to have that kind of effect on people. But we never let Robin Williams be just Robin Williams. He felt that every time he was on a show, he had a, I won't say put on an act, but he was performing. He was somebody. My wife happened to meet Alan King one time, many, many, many years ago, at a party. And The Alan King that you saw on stage was not the Alan King that she remembered. He was an ordinary guy. He wasn't really very funny and not very talkative. But as soon as they got out there on the stage, they became a different persona. So it was with Robin Williams. You can give Robin Williams a situation, and he can go on for 20 minutes on his own, just to improvise. But who was Robin Williams? You know, that's the big way. Who was he?
I think a wider, to expand the parentheses that we put around these people, and I'm not saying this for shock value, the word hero, H-E-R-O, is also pronounced whore, H-O-R-E. And we prostitute ourselves when we worship other people. There's nothing wrong with looking up to someone. We do need role models in a certain sense. But I think in the United States, and I think it's infected most of the rest of the world, it's completely out of control. The media, the worshiping, the whole, Hollywood, and it's really crazy, and I think it's a sickness. The people in the Eastern teaching have a way that they describe how fast we live in Western culture. It's called the hurry sickness, and we're constantly hurrying to get somewhere else. We're constantly rushing to get to the next place or experience, and I think we should ask ourselves, why is it that I'm in such a hurry, and what am I hurrying away from? And I think the ultimate answer, at least for me, and I'm only 45, I'm still learning, certainly.
Oh, you're a
if
kid.
I'm running, if I'm running from anything, it's the truth of who I really am and what I'm really capable of, and what this thing that we call God really has to reveal to me, not through a book that someone wrote 2,000 years ago, not through a religion that was fed to me as a child, but through my own personal experience. That's what I think we learn from. I really do.
Well, and then we ask ourselves, are we running from maybe actually identifying what we're running from, to discover what we're running from? It's easier to run away than to stay put and think about it and actually face it.
Excellent point.
It's almost like when you have a dream. When I was a kid, I used to dream about falling, but I never hit the ground. I would always wake up before I hit the ground. And I wonder, is that because if you were to fall and hit the ground, that you would die? You don't die in your dreams. You just go from one dream to another dream to another dream. And they last only about 90 seconds.
But you never die in a dream.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
You never die in your dream. If you think about it. We never die in our dream.
You're right. I think we've all had the falling sensation or dream.
And then, I think it was Rene Descartes who said that we exist because right now somebody is sleeping and dreaming our existence right now. Okay, that person is dreaming us, and when that person wakes up, we cease to exist, and it's what we call our sleep. Okay, so it's cyclical. Again, just food for thought. That's all.
That's a good point. I've often thought that maybe, what if the dream state is actually a reality, and what we think is the waking state is actually the dream?
And think about right, and think about the person who is in a persistent coma. Okay, doctors tell you to speak to the person because they in their own way they can hear you. What are they dreaming? Okay, what dreams are they having?
Or are they dreaming?
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. There may not be any electrical waves on the EEG, but who's to say that they're not dreaming in that constant state of being in a coma?
Yeah, I think as long as your heart is beating, there's some force flowing through you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I think as long as your heart is beating, there's some force of life flowing through you at whatever level, regardless.
Well, that's why religious people and some people say, it's so hard to make that decision to turn off the machine, okay?
Yeah.
Because they hope beyond hope that something's going to happen and that person is somehow going to awaken. My own personal experience. 11 years ago, I went in for simple meniscus surgery on my knee. And the doctor was administering a spinal. And I could feel the anesthesia working. It numbed my lower torso. Okay. And then all of a sudden, I was talking to the anesthesiologist, and I couldn't breathe. And I got scared as hell out of my mind. And I said, there's something wrong. I can't breathe. And I woke up a day and a half later in the hospital. Okay, what happened was he had administered the anesthesia. Evidently, he administered just a little bit too much. And the anesthesia had no place else to go. So once it anesthetized my lower torso, it started to creep up. And it started to affect my heart and my breathing. And for 6 minutes, I went into respiratory distress, and I wasn't breathing. And I already had sleep apnea. So, when I finally woke up, and I eventually went back to work, one of my friends who I worked with at the district office, I was a teacher, said, he was a nurse, and he was also a teacher, and he said, you have no idea how lucky you are. He said, 6-7 minutes without oxygen, he said, you could have been a vegetable. And my neurologist said to me, there are people with your experience that are in nursing homes or rehab centers that have to be fed, that have to be bathed and washed because their mind just doesn't work anymore. So that's my own personal experience. It's my own rebirth.
It is, yeah. But listen, you didn't think before, you don't think now, so really you couldn't notice the difference.
What can I say?
I like the description in the show, and this is one of the biggest questions we all ask ourselves, so you did good to put it in there. Why would a supposedly merciful and loving God allow such atrocities to exist? Of course, war and beheading and all these other things. And my answer to that would be, is if we believe in God, then that belief includes the atrocities. In other words, what if God is both good and evil at the same time, and we're just not mature enough to accept it? Because if we do, we have to stare deeper and look at ourselves and say, maybe that all of these things that could possibly be God, whether they be good and evil at the same time, if God created me, then that means those exist within me. And that scares the hell out of us.
Well, going back to what you said earlier, it's like a coin with heads and tails. You have good on one side, evil on the other. So for all the good, there's also bad. And, nowhere is it more clear than I think in the Old Testament. The Jews are constantly talking about a merciful God, yet God allowed 6 million Jews and 6 million gypsies and homosexuals and supposedly perverts, according to Germany, to be exterminated in concentration camps. Okay? He allowed Noah to survive, yet he destroyed mankind because he felt that man was evil and he wanted to start over. And then I said, what I said after that, if you recall, if you were listening, I'm not sure when you came into the show, but I said, in this day and age, the only way for God to start over is if, unfortunately, somebody presses the button and we nuke ourselves, and then the survivors finally learn a lesson and try to come together to make a new world. And the sad thing is that they would make a new world up to a certain point, and then we'd have the same crap all over again.
I think an excellent point to make would be of the writings of a man by the name of John Lilly, and he uses a term called consciousness without object, which leads me to what you just said. Picture yourself waking up tomorrow and there are no human beings on the planet. What's left? You know, I think we're addicted to substance. We think that if we eliminate all of the human bodies, which is just flesh and bone from the soil, as the Bible tells us, then it would be a reset. I disagree. I think that the bodies and the bone and the flesh it's just an extension of who we are. I think it's what's underneath all of that needs to change, regardless of how many human beings live on the planet.
Well, wasn't it Plato who said that man's curse is that when we die, okay, we go into a room with other souls and other knowledge until it's like a bakery. Your number comes up, boom, you go into another body. It's only until you reach a certain stage where you no longer are reincarnated into another body or another person, because you've reached the stage of pure knowledge and pure energy.
Yep. Now, that takes me back to the Garden of Eden, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm not an expert. It said something about you can do anything but know. That completely contradicts not what you just said, but the idea of what you just said. You can do anything, but you can't know. Isn't that what it said? You can do anything but know. And I think that's a contradiction that most people in this particular religion haven't reconciled yet.
Well, because then that would make man equal to the Pope, equal to God. And God said, you know, from this tree you shall not eat, because when you eat from this fruit, you will be like God. And that's one thing that God wouldn't tolerate. You know, thou shalt have no other God before me. I am that I am. I'm the El Jefe. I'm the big guy. Okay? And don't ever think that you are my equivalent.
I think if an omnipotent creator has to tell its creations, you shall have no other gods before me, that tells me there's some competition out there that creator's a little bit worried about that we might be interested in, don't you?
Well, that's why then you have the New Testament, where you have nothing but good in the New Testament. Jesus is espousing love your neighbor. You know, you go from one to the other. You have the Old Testament where you have everything, okay, every sin conceivable. Even, what is it? That's part of my memory from that surgery. Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. Lot, yes. Lot's wife is turned to a pillar of salt. Lot's daughters think that they are the only survivors left in the world because their whole universe, Sodom and Gomorrah, were destroyed. So they feel they have to procreate the world, so they get their father drunk and they sleep with their father. Well, there's incest. Okay, you have incest in the Old Testament. So you go through all of these things, and then you have Jesus saying, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, preaching the salvation of man, how one can be saved. And then you have Muhammad in something like 400 and something or 600 and something, when he goes up in his dream and he talks to God, only his God is Allah. And since that's the last book that's written, that's why Muslims tend to believe that that's the last word. There were no other Bibles written after that. You have the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. So it's like the third version is perfect. That's the one.
I think it's fascinating that the bulk of people on the planet, and I could be completely wrong, maybe I'm just locked in Western culture because that's what I grew up in. I live in the U.S. we're so transfixed by these books that were written so many years ago, and we tend to be very narrow in our thinking and our expansion of what's possible, what God is, what it means to know and to live and to be and to experience. And we just stay so narrowly focused on that. I don't think that it speaks to our ultimate potential, but I think it speaks to where we're at currently, and I think we've got a lot of growing up to do in that area. We really need to open up our eyes.
Well, I honestly don't think we'll ever reach that stage. I think man, I can't speak for agnostics and atheists, okay? I'm only speaking for those who have a belief of some kind in a superior being, and an all-omnipotent and omniscient God, is that we have to have something that's higher than we are. Because when you look at the world, and if man is as good as it gets, man, we really are in a sorry state, you know?
Yeah, we are.
Excuse me.
You know, but half the religions in the world don't believe in a God like us.
What do you mean?
People, you know, in China.
Well, in certain Eastern religions,
yeah,
they revere the elderly, okay, and the ancestors. But I still think that they believe in some form of higher being.
I'm not sure, I'll be honest with you.
I don't know if the Japanese believe that Hirohito was, you know, the end-all and be-all, you know. I mean, I can't say. I am not versed in that, so for me it would just be speculation.
Well, we've got three... Go ahead.
I'd like to clarify something very, very important, because I happen to personally know a gentleman who would describe himself as a very hardcore atheist, which most of Western people believe is someone who does not believe in any type of God. And if dictionary.com is telling us any bit of truth, and let's just trust it for now, atheist comes from the word theist. And that means a person who believes in the doctrine of theism. Well, what is theism? It's a person who believes in the existence of God or gods. That's what theism is. So when someone says, I'm an atheist, I think most of them mistakenly believe that it means they don't believe in a creator, when in reality it means that they do. And I think we need to look at the way it's spelled, and I'm not saying this to be trivial. A space theist. I am a pause theist. I believe in the doctrine of theism. I believe in the existence of a God. And that in itself, if I'm young and I say, well, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, that's a deception in and of itself.
When you put it that way, yes. It certainly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing. And you know, we go back to a particular book. In the beginning was the Word, and I'm not quoting it, I'm not an expert. Yes, and again, the world of opposites. The Word can be powerful, but it can also be incredibly deceptive. And I think it's a tool, you know, life and death is in the tongue, as they say. I think we sling a little bit too much around here in Western culture, and we really need to slow down and pay attention to what it is that we say and where does it really come from, and not necessarily who created the word in the first place, but what does it really mean when I say this word? You know, what's my intent when I use this word instead of just blindly saying it?
Well, as a retired English teacher, I have to tell you, you hit the nail on the head, because the way you say certain phrases, you know, determines what people think. You can take the same sentence and say it 2 or 3 different ways, and each way it means something different.
Yeah.
So it's how you say it.
I've heard that, and I don't know if this is true because I haven't studied it, but I've heard that in certain things like Mandarin Chinese, the word can be spelled exactly the same, but if you pronounce it differently, it completely changes what it means.
I would
and to me, that's
that.
fascinating.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean,
believe that. I thank you very much.
Now, does anybody, Ann, you
Dead
still
Shepherd.
And
just to let you know that every Friday we try to do a religious show at this time. So if you happen to be listening, we'd love to hear your comments again.
And you're still there?
Excuse me?
I said,
Hello?
Hello?
He's still on the line.
Yeah. No, he's here. Anybody there?
Hello?
I'm here.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, Ann.
Yeah. Dead Shepherd, you still there?
I apologize.
Yeah.
I know you probably wanted to chime in at some point, Ann, and I apologize for stealing your thunder.
No. It was great listening to you guys.
Now, Ann, maybe you would know. In
what?
The religions of the East, did they believe in God? The Far East? Do you know by any chance?
So the Aspect region is a mixed culture of all religions. I mean, so I'm going to say there's probably groups that don't. There's Catholicism. Most of the people that I know in the Aspect region are Christian. So I'm going to say that's probably true.
I don't know.
Neither do I. But just to remind people, our number is 646-595-3275. We've been talking to Ann from Colorado and Deb Shepherd this evening.
Where are you from, Deb Shepherd?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
All right.
Okay.
You a musician?
No, I'm a banker.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
In a
okay.
money factory.
Not far from Opryland.
The
Grand Old Opry.
Spit on Upland with a good tailwind from where I live.
Really? Oh, so you must live in a
Yep.
nice area.
Yeah, well, I'm just north of Nashville. If you look at the Roman Coliseum down there that they call Titan Stadium, you can be there in probably 15 minutes with no traffic from where I live.
Okay.
Great.
Well, I just want to remind you that, Mondays we usually have a political show at 9 o'clock, and Fridays we usually have our religious show. And,
Well, I'll tell you, these
I'm
days...
not, first of all, I'm not saying this so that you should hang up. I'm just saying that if you enjoy talking like this, we'd love to have you come back.
And the other thing is, I was going to say, with these days, with the religion and politics, it's all intermixed, and you can't really keep the politics away from the religion or the religion out of the politics in reality.
Yeah, and I'll again lend a little bit of wordplay there. The word politics, the root is pole, and pole means opposite. And it's used for a very specific reason. It's to keep people divided.
Well, our Congress certainly does.
Yes, sir.
The numbers don't lie when you talk about the least productive Congress in American history, as far as not getting anything done at all. You have now. I know, coming from Tennessee. I mean, I'm not saying that you're a Republican, but that's Republican territory, and I just wonder what happened to the old moderate Republicans like Everett Dirksen and Howard Baker, who used to be able to, or Jacob Javits or Rockefeller, who used to be able to reach across the aisle and work together with Democrats and try to get something done for this country.
Well, the truth of the matter is I was born in upstate Illinois in Rockford, right near the border of Wisconsin. You could get to Kenosha in about 15 minutes.
Okay.
And we left when I was 2. My parents split up. We left when I was 2. And was very fortunate to grow up in Southern California in San Diego, which is just a huge mixture of just about everything you can possibly imagine.
I have friends in San Diego, so I know.
Yeah. So I have no political leanings. I have no religious leanings. My mom, was raised Catholic until the 8th grade, but went through 3 or 4 different religions down through the years, just searching, finding her peace, which she finally did, but I just happened to live in Tennessee. This is where I ended up. I met my wife, who happened to live here when I was living in the Mississippi Delta, but was a transplant there. So I'm just like an all-around Yankee. But I've had people tell me that are friends of mine that are very devout Christians. They say, you're not a liberal, you're not a Republican. What are you? I said, the only thing I want to know is the damn truth. That's all I care about. Let's just get down to the bottom of it, man.
You're a humanist.
That's it.
Basically.
You're a man.
Yeah.
Being.
And when I heard you say your mom had gone through some changes as far as religion goes, we had a gentleman who used to call up, whose dad was we called him Dr. Don. He was a PhD in psychology, and he had gone through some religious changes. Okay, and we used to have discussions like this with him. Discussing human nature, etc. So, I mean, if nothing else, you have a very varied background, so you can see various arguments one way or the other. You have an open mind. You're not totally closed, which is really what we need. We need to send people like that to Congress. Somebody who is willing to speak his or her piece and speak their mind, but also say, but I respect your right to say something, and maybe we can meet in the middle.
Well, unfortunately, there are very few Democrats or Republicans willing to do that right now.
I view the current state of American politics as an addiction. And the harsh part of me says, let's just put them all in rehab and let them go through a hardcore detox. If they die, they die. If they live, they live. But then the other part of me, who has been through addiction, says we need to wean them off just a little bit at a time, not too slow, but not too fast, and then we need to shake them out of their reverie. But I think that politics it needs to be completely leveled from the foundation. And the foundation needs to be jackhammered, and all the rebar and the concrete needs to be hauled away, and we need to build something completely different here in the U.S.
I agree with you. I always say, this is my favorite thing, the Congress has a 10% approval rating, but 90% of the Congress is going to get voted back in.
That says a lot about the American people, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Europe... Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
I actually think it's sad because I believe that there's an entire generation of Y-gens and X-gens who are, in that age bracket of 40 to 50 who can definitely impact change. And for whatever reason, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Well, people are afraid of change.
Well, that's true. That's very true. But, I look at, obviously, I watch a lot of MSNBC, but occasionally I'll put Fox on and I'll put CNN on. And even on MSNBC, they have Republicans who have points of view, and on Fox, they have an occasional Democrat that has a point of view. But if they could sit down and talk, why can't we get the Congress to do the same thing? It's amazing. There is common ground if you look for it.
I think the first place that we could start is we need to stop paying these people to be there. Quite a bit. And I'm not saying they're all evil. I mean, there's a lot of crap that goes on. We know that. But if I, for example, come to you and say, you need to stop taxing me, what I'm telling you in code is, I don't want you to have a job anymore, which equates to, I want to take bread off of your table. Because government was built for one reason only, to expand, to grow, diminish the power of the individual. And most people just aren't ready to really understand that at a deep level. So when I look at a politician and say, why did you vote this way, which I don't do? Why did you vote that way? It's ridiculous, because I'm asking him, if I say, stop taxing me, I'm telling him, I want to cut your salary. that doesn't go and flow with what he's there to do, which is to feed his family, to live. And we've got that so mixed up here in the U.S. It's really sad.
Well, there have been people who are thinking of term limits in the Senate and in the Congress. So we already have it. The mayors of cities, the governors of states. Why not in Congress? By what right does a man or woman have to sit in Congress for 36 years? Okay, that's a generation and a half. Okay. Certainly there's room for somebody else to come along with different ideas.
Yeah.
They get so complacent. I mean, in the House of Representatives, you're only there for 2 years. So you have 1 year to make some sort of change. You come in gung-ho, you want to do this, you want to do that, and then you realize the stalemate that you're faced with. And in the second year, you're busy raising money to be reelected.
Yeah. I think the entire structure of politics and the fact that we actually elect people and let our proxy or our power of attorney, I think that's our problem. And it goes back to religion. I want the Pope to be the person I go through to reach. I think that's what we do with politicians at a deep subconscious level. We don't really know we're doing it, but we do it. And that's the reason why we tolerate as much as we do, because deep in our hearts we want to believe that they're there to do good and that they're trying to change, and that eventually, somebody's going to come along and make some changes. But I think the politics and the religion at a deep subconscious level are so closely paralleled. We don't even know that they're intertwined, but yet we do need to understand that they are, and we need to separate them completely.
It's true. Some people will they refuse to discuss something until the church has made a statement. Okay,
yeah.
and then they feel free enough to come out and say something. But that's why we said in the Constitution that there should be a separation of church and state.
Well, there is none, unfortunately. It's not there. It's just not there right now.
One of the best writings I ever had the chance to taste. Never thoroughly digested it and could say I'm an expert on it, but my uncle recommended it to me years ago when I was in my 20s. He said, read anything by Lysander Spooner. And Lysander Spooner was a man who lived before the 1900s. And he had an essay called The Constitution of No Authority. If anybody's listening, I just recommend it. I'm not trying to bait anybody or anything. I think it's an excellent read. You can Google it and find it. And it poses a very good question, and really caused me to pause and really look at the whole idea and paradigm of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all these other things, and just really question even those documents and the ideas that we have around them. And it leads me to the question that someone asked, if we're really as free as we think we are, why do we need a piece of paper to tell us?
Now, I'm laughing because I remember reading something somebody had posted where they said they showed a roll of toilet paper, and they said, why do you have to advertise this? This is something that everybody uses. You need toilet paper, so why advertise it? Well, it's the same thing with what you just said. No authority. We know that we need certain things. We don't need any one person to say we should do it this way or that way. It makes me laugh. But then again, it's...
Yeah, but I think it also falls too. Why does McDonald's have to put on their cups, coffee is hot? Why do we have to see a sign that when it's icy out, the road is slippery? It's just what we've become.
Yeah. I love the old saying, it doesn't matter how much perfume you spray on a turd, it's still a turd.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
There's just, a steak is a steak. You can grind it up, you can put different things on it, but in the end, it's a steak.
Yeah. It's true.
I think we've been so busy putting A1 and buffalo wing sauce on truth that we don't even know what it tastes like anymore, man.
Yeah.
We have to pay other people to define it for us. I'm going to pay you $2 an hour, you who went to law school, to tell me what steak tastes like. And it's like, well, you know, the person sitting there going, you can do this on your own, but if you're willing to pay me, I guess I'll tell you what it tastes like.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you were saying before about us needing, I think human beings need a book. They need guidance. They need the Constitution. I don't think most people can run their own lives without some guidance, an outside source to tell them what to do.
Well, the same argument can be made about God. You know, some people need God in their life.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
They need to believe in this higher, omnipotent being who's passing judgment on all of us. Imagine how sorry some of us are going to be when we find out heaven is empty. You know.
Yeah.
Now what's going to happen to Robin Williams? Where's he going to go?
Well, you know, if you well, then again, in one of his movies, What Dreams May Come, which happened to be on cable one day this week, another one of my favorites. His children are killed in an accident. He dies in an accident. His wife becomes despondent and she commits suicide. And he's told that his wife will not be allowed to go to heaven, that she's in purgatory. And he gives up heaven to go to purgatory to look for her. And he finds her. And you know, the line in the movie is, sometimes when you win, you lose, and sometimes when you lose, you win. And then the next thing you know, that both of them are being reincarnated. And you know, he asks her, "Would you like to go through this again?" He said, It's funny. I spoke to the kids, and they said that they're all for it. We should, because time means nothing when you're dead. There is no time. And she said, "Well, you think we'd find each other?" And he said, "Well, you know, I found you in hell. Don't you think I would find you in Jersey?" You know, and that's how it ended. You know, they're both a little boy and a little girl at a lake, and they discover each other. You know, but I don't know. You know, that's why the Greeks believe that, you know, when somebody died, you put 2 coins on their eyes, because when some people pronounce it Karen, some people say Sharon, but the boat keeper in the river Styx, you know, you have to pay him to take you across. Otherwise, you remain in purgatory. You know. I guess until your case comes up where you're judged whether or not you can go to heaven or the other place, you know.
Maybe they're both the same.
I don't know. I think right now, you know, there used to be a great stigma placed upon suicide. You couldn't be buried in hallowed ground. Okay, you can't get the final blessings. You know, but I think that's all changed because of, I guess because of, you know, the way we look at things now. You hate to say it, but more and more people are doing it. I mean, is that to say that these people will not be granted, you know, final blessings or rest in hallowed ground, or their soul will not be able to ascend to heaven, especially when the Pope now says that even atheists can go to heaven. You know, Francis is a cool guy, I really have to say. You know, I have a feeling that, and I said this when he was nominated and elected, I think he has the potential to be another John the 23rd when it comes to making changes in the Catholic Church. As far as, people looking at the world and looking at the problems of the world. I only hope it comes to be. I really do. For the millions of Catholics in the world.
Not to change the subject in a radical way, but Sunday morning at 9 Central, I'll be spending an hour and a half in a float tank, pondering questions just such as we've talked about here in the last 30 to 45 minutes. What is God? What does it mean to exist? Does God exist? Who am I? What does it mean to know?
Name? It was 9 o'clock in the evening?
No, 9 o'clock in the morning.
9 in the morning, and what was the name of the show?
No, what I'm saying is on Sunday at 9 a.m. Central, I'll be experiencing a float tank. It's flotation therapy is what it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, zero gravity, salt water, that kind of thing.
Really? What does that do for you?
Yeah.
You know what I think? I think of the movie Altered States.
No, I know what it, but I'd like to know what it does. He was just starting to explain to us.
In a simple way, and by the way, I actually saw that movie for the first time a couple months ago, so I can see where floating got a really crazy kind of a rap back then. Just think of it as a bathtub full of warm water with so much salt in it, Epsom salt, that you float like a cork. So it's kind of like a massage without anybody touching you.
It's like
but if you subtract light and sound, you can, and I don't want to say meditate because that's an Eastern term, but some call it that. I would call it, if a person were a Christian, I would call it the purest form of communication with God that you could possibly exist or possibly experience in your life, because you take all external stimuli and you remove them from the mechanics of the brain and the muscles and all the other things. And you're just basically left with your thoughts. And you can do anything you want to do, think the way you want to think. You can just relax. You can think about your coffee. You can think about your relationships. You can talk to God. You can do whatever. And it's a really neat experience.
Interesting. Sounds like the Dead Sea.
Exactly. It's about, I think I've read that it's several times more salty than the Dead Sea. So when you sit in there, it just looks like a tub of water. You just sit down, and the second you lay back, you immediately float to the surface of the water. So the temperature of the water is set to where once you settle down, it takes about 15 minutes to just sort of relax. Eventually, if you relax enough, you don't feel the water touching your skin anymore.
Really?
Yeah, it's awesome. Really cool.
That's right. Is that a medical thing, or is it just?
Well, for me, no. There's people that use it for things like fibromyalgia or pain or whatever. I've read stories. Haven't experienced people with chronic pain have been a week, 2 weeks without pain. There's that part of it. But then there's also the mental or the spiritual part of it if you want to go there. But one doesn't necessarily happen unless that's what your intention is. In other words, you can go in there and leave the lights in the room on it and just lay back and just say, I want my muscles to relax. I want to experience zero gravity. And you can do that. Or you can turn the lights off and you can go into other realms or other areas of what the experience can do for you.
Well, I hate to be a grim reaper here, but that sounds like a perfect point to end the show on, because we only have about 5 minutes to say goodbye to everybody and thank everyone for listening. And I know I would like to thank our guests, Dev Shepard and Ann. It's been a pleasure. It always is when we have more than one person, namely Felix and I, talking to each other. Gives us a great opportunity to share ideas and thoughts. And once again, I thank both of you for calling in. And let's do it again.
It was fun.
Absolutely.
It truly was. Thank you both.
Have a good weekend.
And you as well.
You too. Have a joy weekend. And good night.
And thank you.
Good night, guys.
We didn't lose you, did we?
No, she's there.
What?
We didn't lose
I'm
you,
here.
did we?
No. I'm here. It's interesting listening to you guys.
Well, thank you. It's interesting listening to you as well.
Night, guys.
All right, thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Well, Felix, it's you and me.
Now, let's see.
We want to thank, like I said, I would like to thank our callers and the person who was in the chat room, that person who had some thoughts earlier in the show. Felix, it's always a pleasure getting together with you and sharing these thoughts.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we were able to make some sense out of all this, and
it was definitely an interesting show, ladies and gentlemen.
we ask you to look forward to the Coffee Club on Monday, where we will be discussing, believe it or not, Watergate 40 years later.
Okay. Why not? I bet we don't stand it long.
Well, unless we get some callers, it's just going to be you and me. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
Thank you again, and hope to hear from you on Monday. Thank you, and good night.